Recording in progress.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this December 12th meeting of the Budget, Capital, and Personnel Committee. I see everyone is present and accounted for, and we can raise our hands to vote. The first item on our agenda is minutes approval for November 14th. I want to again thank Lee Shurtleff for doing an excellent job of chairing the meeting. If someone would like to move those minutes. Rich moves, Greg seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. There are a couple of additional resolutions on the agenda. They should be on your desk. One is an appropriation from Contingent Fund for software support from a prior year, and another is an appropriation from Contingent Fund for terminal pay for the Finance Department. And we will get to those when we hear from our Interim Finance Director, Drew Brayman. So we have no comments from the public that I'm aware of. Is that right, Taylor? Okay. Just a note, everybody, Veronica's teaching this afternoon. She will be available at 3:20 to do a WDIC update. So I guess when we get to 3:20, we'll just shift to hear her update. Thank you. Taylor informed me of that. So now, County Administrator Report. Lisa Holmes.
Thank you, Deborah. I just have a few quick items to update the committee on, and then a couple of resolutions. So as you're aware, we've reopened the search for Deputy County Administrator. We have the same stalwart committee of search committee or interview panel that has been with us and is reconvening. We have a new slate of candidates that we will be considering and moving forward with that process before the end of the year. We decided, given the timeline of how things fell, to postpone the start of the recruitment period for Chief Equity Diversity Officer until after the first of the year, after the holidays, just because it's typically a more fruitful time to recruit. And we will be commencing the search for a homeless services coordinator after the holidays as well. So those are the kind of the personnel updates. And then the good news that we shared in writing, but we can say in person, is that we went through and selected a software vendor for the new budget software, budget management software, which we will start that transition. We're starting that transition now, and Norma can answer further questions on that. But that was a really good selection process led by Norma.
Rich.
If it's okay, I would like to hear just a few words on how is this better? What are you excited about?
Well, I was excited about the fact that we will have the ability to see more of what's happening throughout the year, being able to compare the budget to actual expenditures. But more importantly, the ability to see the vacancies, because a big portion of our budget is payroll, and we'll be able to see what the vacancies are and relate that to what's been budgeted and have a better sense of how those funds should be budgeted year after year, right? So we'll be able to see, okay, for the most part, these positions aren't being filled until 3 or 4 months in. We don't really need to put that kind of budget expectation on the position, things like that. So I'm excited about that. The other thing that I think the legislature will find really useful and valuable is the way you can track capital projects, because it is a very different model. So although I haven't gotten directly into it, just looking at the overview of how capital will be tracked, it's something that will integrate the highway department and airport and those folks can actually give us input on a regular basis into the system and be able to provide that information to the public and to the legislature. So in each of the legislators will be able to have their own individual dashboard to be able to monitor that information. So that's my little high overview because I haven't really had the opportunity to get directly in it. And I think we're going to find some efficiencies just by working with the departments and building. We have a really nice team of people who have stepped up to talk about how we do business. And I think that anytime you can pull that kind of pool together and have that conversation, we can only see really good benefits from that.
If I could add, it's really going to take us from where we are now. The software that we have now is a budget book production software. And we use it very intensively a certain time of the year to produce the budget book that you receive, and then to translate that budget into the finance system that we use. What we're moving to is an actual budget management tool that departments can use throughout the year to actively manage their budgets, that we and you will be able to use throughout the year to see where things stand. It has a component for outcome measures, so for performance-based budgeting that I think will serve us well and where we want to go with that piece of it. And it integrates and talks to our HR payroll system and our finance system. So all of those pieces should integrate very nicely, which we don't have that right now. So.
Is it going to, can I ask?
Yeah, I had some follow-up. Go ahead.
Just wild question from one of the legislators. Will you have some form of tracking for revenues and fund balances and that type of thing? Will it be a tool that can be used to kind of monitor that? Will you see that integration?
Or the legislature? Is that what you
Well,
said?
no, I'm asking as a legislator.
Oh.
But will it show your what the cumulative effects are through the
Yes.
year on your revenues and
It provides a dashboard
funds.
that's a little, so we have that in the financial system now, but it will give a better picture, kind of a graphic picture of where we are as we move along through the year.
That's great. You like it, Drew?
I like it, yes. I was involved in looking at both of the finalists, and I think it went very well. If I may step in on Lee's second part on the fund balance, what the challenge is in government, and Lee, I think you experience this as a department head, is oftentimes you have to spend the funds and then submit them to New York State or the federal government, and then they review and adjust, and they send you a check, and that's a 3 to 6 month process. With the airport, it's actually, we just got paid for a 2016 claim.
Holy cow.
So, we've had this $2,000 question mark for a while. So I think that's the challenge, and that's why we've typically only shown that at year end, is to give the time for all the dust to settle. You need that 3 or 4 month period to say, okay, you spent $500,000. The state says 400 is eligible, but we're only going to give you 329 because of this, this, and this. So it's tough to record a $500,000 revenue, and then 3 months later it becomes 329,000, and that's why the fund balance is so delayed. I think the dashboards will give a more current picture of where we're at. And it's not that we haven't had a lot of these reports. It's been clunky. I think probably the last time we bought software was 7 or 8 years ago at the most recent. So between updating payroll in the last year or two that you heard about to now updating the budget, I think financials will be soon after that. Their software today is much different than it was 5, 7, 10 years ago. And it's much improved. And it's going to be a breath of fresh air, I hope, so.
I had a couple,
Go ahead.
actually, 3 other things. One, the vacancy rate, if you could remind me what we approved in our budget, was it 3% or?
Was
believe it was.
3%. We started at it too.
And historically, it's been running 3 to 5%? That was my, okay. The second one is, with the new software, will we have a different budget book? Is that going to change? Or so it's going to look different this year. And are you planning to do any training for legislators so we understand what the capabilities are and how we're supposed to behave differently in light of, okay. Oh, good.
Actually, I would probably reach out to the to at least a few legislators to see in different during implementation, different sections of that, just to kind of get input from how it, how it looks when we get ready to do the output.
I agree with Lee. I think if we can account for a lot of variables, if we had a more steady view of where's our fund balance, I think everybody would just be more comfortable. Yeah. So, thanks.
Anybody else? Mike?
Lisa, you sent us a couple of emails about the deputy sheriff contract, and do you want to just, I don't think you mentioned it publicly, but I think it's been tied up, hasn't it?
Yes, thank you, Mike. We have a signed agreement with Road Patrol, and I believe. Pardon me. And so the final and the retroactive payouts are in process to be completed and paid out by the end of the year. So.
You made that sound very simple, but I think that's something that you and the other people have worked very, very hard on. It's been very, very difficult, even though it's been between our attorneys and that's the association's attorneys. A lot of foot dragging, a lot of frustration, a lot of nitpicking. Thank you for your perseverance, and we appreciate the goodwill of the members of the Deputy Sheriff's Association as well.
Thank you. And it is worth noting that we've had a series of awards, MOAs, interest arbitration awards since 2004, and this is a document that that finalizes and compiles everything in one document that we've agreed to, both parties have agreed to, from 2004 to 2025. So it will serve all parties well to govern under this comprehensive agreement. So thank you again for bringing that up, Mike. It's important.
Sure.
Comp study? Is Ruby
That's
gonna?
under Ruby, yep.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I don't see Ruby here yet, but,
Behind us.
oh, she's in stealth mode. Hey, Ruby, you can come sit up here if you'd like. So let's save that till the human resources part of our meeting. Okay, we have a couple of resolutions. We have resolution amending resolution number 225 of 2022, authorizing 2023 payments for Tompkins Cortland Community College operating budget ID 11346. Can I get a motion on that, please? Thank you, Greg, seconded by Mike. Any discussion about this? Rich?
My reading of it was just that it's the same number, but it's split to recognize the capital
Right.
component. That's all? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? We ready to vote? All in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous. And then we have authorization to disperse funds, county administration, ID number 11276. Can I get a motion on that one, please? Lee moves, Rich seconds. This is pretty standard every year resolution, right? Any questions from anybody? Ready to vote? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, Drew, Director of Finance report.
Good afternoon. So I'll just be brief. A few things going on in the finance world. We are busy trying to fill in while Rick is enjoying retirement. So he did promise me he'll stop in next week and go over some more things with me. So his pile is growing on that. Some good news is I think we're finally through the 2021 review of the report to New York State. So we worked with the auditors last week to wrap that up. They are having us adjust how the ARPA funds are reported a little bit on our annual report. So you're going to see a budget adjustment coming through in the future for that I'm working with Norma on. And it's really the ARPA funds they want to run through the general fund. And if they go to the construction fund or the highway fund or the community development fund, they want them all running through the operational fund so the state can pull a few accounts from one place and get all the information. We don't necessarily agree with it. The auditors agree with us, but we'll do it the way the state wants to do it.
Can I ask, does the Treasury Department agree with how the state wants to do it? Because that could be.
The Treasury isn't so concerned how it's shown on the state report, as long as in the whole government it's shown correctly. And that was part of our argument with the auditors. We are doing this in agreement with the Treasury report and guidance, and the state said we're just tweaking that to improve it.
So this is sounding dangerously close to a double set of books on how we report those ARPA funds. I mean, we report it one way for the state and another way for the feds.
No, it'll still be the same way
Okay.
for both. It just flows through
Different accounts?
our accounts, yeah. So you'll see that a little bit. That has taken hours to come to a consensus on, though. We've been dealing with that question with the state since July, and Rick tried to wrap it up before he left, and it dragged on and on. So we have finally had a meeting with the auditors, came up with a way that we could acceptably do it, which will help us close out 2021. As we're preparing to close out 2022, and as Norma keeps pushing me to get the 2023 budget going in live. So accountants are always looking far back. So doing that with a vacancy has been a challenge, but we're making it work. So I think that's our highlight. We are looking forward to the accountant position that's in the 2023 budget and the purchasing assistant, and that's in Ruby's resolution coming to you. So we're working on those position titles and those job descriptions as we speak right now. And a lot of good stuff happening. So I think that's it for myself, except for the two items, and I apologize they weren't in the packet originally, but we do have two contingency fund requests. Do you want me to talk about those now, or?
Well, let's get them on the floor, shall we? Okay, we've got the initial resolution ID 11374, appropriation from contingent funds, software support from prior year. Can I get a motion, please? Rich moves, Greg seconds. Okay, tell us about this one, Drew.
This is always in our budget, and going along with our software discussion, there were several antiquated items that we were being billed for. We tried to clarify those with the software vendor, and during COVID, they had a lot of changes in their technical support. So we did take some time. We set up several meetings, and in the end, we ended up that we did have to go back and pay some of the past fees. We did hold up on paying them. We still had support during that time, but it was at times difficult dealing with software vendors over the last couple of years. I think COVID was part of that. I think the job market's part of that, and they're just not always they're eager to get your business, but then when you need help afterwards, and we're 8, 9, 10 years down that road or more. So this was in our budget. Technically, it would have gone through the rollover process, but we aren't doing that anymore. So that's a good thing. So I'm coming to you for contingency. So the money went into the fund balance, and this just takes it back out through contingency.
Okay, any questions for Drew? All in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. And then one last one. ID number 11372, appropriation from contingent fund, terminal pay finance department. Can I get a motion on that one, please? Greg moves, Mike seconds. And I assume this is for,
Fairly standard. We've had 2 retirements, Rick and Joanne, our accounting services director, earlier this year. So fairly standard from departments to request that money from contingency, as it's a big chunk that's not in your budget. You don't know when you'll end up paying it out ever, so.
questions? All in favor? That's unanimous as well. Well, thank you, Drew. Anything else? Any last words?
Any questions?
I know Shauna and I met with Drew this morning, and he's working hard at reaching out to other department heads and trying to be proactive in getting information out as things change in our fiscal and compliance landscape. So thank you for that, Drew.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we're up to committee chair reports. Taylor, she's not on yet? Okay. Well, I can blather on for a few minutes. So you will notice we have a resolution coming up, changes in position for various departments. And I think these are all the new positions that we created in our budget process for 2023. I just kind of want to draw your attention to the fact that as I count these, we've got 35 new FTEs, full-time, and 1 new part-time position, and we have not decreased hours or abolished any positions. So we're adding, not insubstantially, to our county workforce. And I do not question that we need these people. We have mandated services and services that our residents have every right to expect from us, and we cannot provide them without staff. But I want you to try to be aware that staffing is already close to half of our $200+ million a year budget. And we've now added 35 new staff. That's going to...
Counted 38.
38? Okay. Well, you're probably better at math than I am.
I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I agree with you. It's a big number.
Yeah, it's a big number. And then there's a related piece of this that Ruby will be talking to us about, and that is the compensation study. And, you know, as chair of BCP, I'm briefed pretty regularly on the difficulties we are having in getting robust applicant pools and hiring people who are willing to work for the salaries we're paying, given the cost of living here. So I think we should be prepared on both of these counts for the amount of our budget that we have to dedicate to staff going up. And I know that some of my colleagues are unhealthily, in my opinion, interested in our fund balance and how to spend it. I think that while I appreciate the generous impulse and the recognition of need in our community, we need to be prudent and understand that we're going to be looking at larger expenses in the future. Some of that money may well have to come from fund balance. And we have no guarantee that fund balance is going to continue to grow. You know, we've been extraordinarily fortunate. In the past, we've had very prudent legislative policies about adding to fund balance every year. So we've built up a good nest egg. And we've also been really fortunate post-pandemic that our sales tax revenue, our casino revenue, our mortgage recording tax revenue, all these juicy little bits of money that we don't necessarily count on have come rolling in beyond all expectations and have built up our reserves. But I don't think we can count on that continuing, not given the economic news that I'm seeing. So I really hope that you will temper your generosity with concern for what we're going to be facing in the out years. And you all are the BCP committee, so you should be setting an example. And you all will do exactly what you please to do, because I'm just one voice. So all I can say is that you do what you please to do, and you're going to have to listen to me rant about this again and again and again, because I am worried that we're not looking out for our taxpayers in future years. So I see Greg and I see Rich.
Thanks, Deb. I know, and we've had many conversations at length about the topic, so I have heard it again and again, so I appreciate hearing it again, and look forward to hearing it again as well. I would hope as we go into 2024 budget season in like 4.5 months, that we take this resolution into account. A lot of the comments we heard was this is getting back to pre-pandemic normals, this is replenishing staff. I would hope that going forward, there would be a little bit more maybe of a tempered approach to adding FTEs into the budget, just based on the sheer volume and a lot of the rationale that we heard many of these brought departments back up to. I think it needs to be a really strong case, because we can't have 35, 7, 8, whatever the exact number of positions is every year. As much as I'd love to grow our county workforce and be the employer of choice in the community, it does create challenges. So hopefully that message can get out early to folks, potentially, that, we sort of had our chance in this, bringing them back to post-pandemic, and this is where the numbers are. So I would hope we wouldn't see the same sort of FTE growth that we saw going into the next budget season. As it relates to the fund balance, I hear Deb's concerns. I hear many concerns. I see the, the economic concerns that many are facing. I was wondering if, and again, I don't want to ask Norma, but I'll ask Norma, as the budget director, or Lisa, or whomever this may be appropriate. It'd be interesting to know, prior to the pandemic, where we were, going into the pandemic, which is where our fund balance likely took the largest hit, right? Because that was the most significant economic event or largest unexpected expenses and things that we've had in probably county history, as long as we've probably all been alive. To sort of see where we were, how we fared, what additional money we came through, and sort of do a little post-mortem on fund balance and the pandemic, because a lot of the concern is that if there's some global event or something that happens, how are we going to fare? I would really like to know how we fared in the last global event, and know that there's a lot of other variables going into that. But if we are sitting at X million dollars above our 18%, which is our policy, is that enough? Is that enough by 2 or 3 times from what we spent last time? What is the amount? Just so that we can have the information and do a look back and say, how did we really fare? Knowing that, financial challenges that we may be facing, our economic challenges, likely would not have the same recovery funds provided by, federal and state partners. But I don't know. I don't know if it's a worthy exercise to sort of look how we've sort of rolled through over the last 3 or 4 years with with our fund balance and where we were at certain times, how much we've used, and what do we really need to weather the storm? Because I do think, Deb, to your point, that's the question, is we need a large nest egg. So is it larger than 18%? And how much?
Oh,
and
God, we debated that.
But I know we debated that, but really let's put some facts to it because we just weathered a storm. So
we ought also, I think, to look back on 2008, 2009, because.
That's fair too.
Yeah, because I think that, from my experience being involved with the FDIC through that period, the impacts, the financial impacts are different. They time differently, they recover differently. As you pointed out, Greg, you didn't get the kind of handouts from the federal government that we enjoyed. And I know that we weren't dependent on ARPA, but it sure helped a lot, especially with our capital planning. So if we're going to look at crises and how fund balance came to our assistance during crises, I think we should look at 2008 as well as the pandemic.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. It'd be interesting to even look and say, okay, what if we didn't have our state and federal handouts? How would our fund balance have fared?
And how would our capital planning have been affected?
Have been different, yeah.
Good point. Okay, because Norma doesn't have anything to do.
Yeah, sorry, Norma.
Rich?
Yeah, I have a lot of perhaps conflicting views on fund balance, and everything you say I generally agree with, that we need to be very, very careful, and the idea of spending our fund balance is not something we should take lightly at all. I also think that would be a good exercise to look at, if we didn't have federal support, where we would have been, so we can gauge what is the right percentage. I would be welcoming reopening that tedious and difficult debate about 18%. I think it should be a higher percentage.
Masochist that you are.
At the same time, I certainly have had people say to me, you county, before I get there, I'd say, I was very happy during the pandemic that we were strong. Mm-hmm. We were able to support other institutions in our area, say like TC3, I think we helped, and the hospital and testing programs and all those things, and we could do it because we had the money. And we should strive to remain there. And that's why I'm saying I think we might want to look at that 18% again. All that said, I have heard people say, that's not your money, that's taxpayer money, and you're sitting on it and you're not investing it. And frankly, if we had a more nuanced policy that we made a higher percentage, but then we looked at, if it's above that, we should be funding some sort of additions to our capital program from that direction. And, I had supported, let's have a range that if it's 18 at the low end, 26% or whatever else, if you're above that, find a use for that money. We should not have it sitting in a bank account doing nothing. The last several years, you're getting almost zero interest, and that doesn't do us any good either. So, but putting that issue to the full legislature and making us think about it, I think would be a good exercise.
Well, it's interesting because these are things that we can add to our committee goals for next year. Norma? And then
Sorry, I see Veronica's on, so I don't want to hold this up, but I just wanted to make a point about the resolution for the positions. Not all of those are brand new positions. Some of those are replacements. I can tell you 5 at least are renames or changes, not brand new, just so that you know. So kind of keep that in your mind.
Well, that knocks us down to 30. I feel a whole lot better. Okay, I've got Mike, and then I've got Lee.
Want to take Veronica before we continue with this discussion?
Veronica, are you in a hurry to get off, or are you done with your teaching duties for the day?
Nope, I am done for the day, so I can be here until 5 if that's the desire.
We'll do our best not to keep you here that long, but I'd like to finish this discussion before you give your report, if that's all right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Did you have anything, Mike?
Yeah, first of all, I liked what you said, and I think it's absolutely right. And I think it's incumbent on the Budget Committee to look very, very carefully at spending and put the brakes on sometimes. We had a very, very fortunate budget process for for 2023 because we had the money that came in from ARPA and we had the money that came in from sales tax and other things. And we were recovering from the hiring freezes and failure to replace some of the positions that our county administrator had recommended for COVID. But certainly we've had other times when things have been pretty tight. I think about the budgets back in the late 90s and early 2000s when there were recessions going on, and how hard they were for us and how much we had to raise taxes that we didn't like, property taxes, of course. Rich, I totally agree with you. I think the reason we ended up on a divided vote with the fund balance figure was simply because there were elements on the legislature who were looking to spend it. And I went against the recommendations of our county administrator and director of finance where we should have had the range. And I would welcome going back to a discussion of that again. We have to be very, very careful about positions that we add. There are lots of good reasons to create a position to handle X or handle Y, a lot of which should be handled within department if they are worthy. We can't always just hire someone new because that's how bureaucracy tends to expand awfully quickly. And I agree with you, Deb, not one of these probably is not a worthy kind of position. We wouldn't have voted for it if it wasn't. But we have to pick and choose. And next year, if we see departments asking for all of these or things like these again, I totally agree. We've got to say, no, we can't do that again 2 years in a row.
Thanks, Mike. Lee?
I'll be brief.
Okay.
No, I appreciate your cautionary
Rant?
diatribe. I don't know. No, seriously, I do appreciate that, and I think that it is incumbent that there be a level of discipline instilled moving forward. I have every confidence that Norma will be able to provide what Greg was asking for, because I did come down and sit down with Norma because I felt a little discomfort, especially after talking with you, and wanted to see a little bit more and understand a little bit more on the fund balance. And ultimately, I felt comfortable with where we moved forward. And affordability came into it because I was really concerned about that tax rate and trying to provide some relief at the same time, trying to see some resources go out. It was a tough balancing act for my first year, but I appreciate where you're going with it. And not to throw cold water, I know we just went from 35 to 30, but the resolution doesn't reflect some of the agencies that we funded, especially the library, in an effort to restore them, as I resoundingly heard from my colleagues, to pre-pandemic levels. And so, actually the number is probably a little, the number goes back in some positions there that we're really funding in this whole mix. And we'll see where we go, but there was strong arguments about trying to get back to where we were before. So we may not have that flexibility. And the other takeaway from my time with Norma is as you provide us that analysis, we did do a lot of deferred expenses and project out 2 or 3 or 4 years worth of things to come. We're holding our breath on the airport and TCAT and a couple of other commitments that are out there where we've had to use some fund balance to support some agencies that typically have been able to fund themselves. So, thank you.
Well, thanks, Lee. I mean, we have several swords of Damocles hanging over our heads. As you know, Lee reminds us about what's going on with the airport, what's going on with TCAT. Yeah. So, I think though that today's discussion has been helpful in that it will inform our discussion next month when we talk about committee goals for next year. And one of the things that I want to add to that mix is we have, for the last couple of years, meant to get around to how we're going to evaluate our direct reports, having a better system, a better protocol for doing that, and other things just kept getting in the way. But I'm hoping that next year we'll buckle down and actually address that, since at that point we will have people in position who've been in position for a while. Along those lines, Shauna and I have instituted weekly meetings with Drew and Bill. Just short little, we touch base and find out what they're dealing with, much like the leadership meetings that we've been having with Lisa, so that we have a better idea of what the issues are in their departments, and they have better access to us if they need it. So, Veronica, how about telling us what's going on at WDIC?
Hello, yes. So can you hear me all right?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. We had our last meeting of the year last week on Wednesday. And the main things we talked about, we heard a little bit of an update on the workforce demographics report from Ruby. And I apologize that I don't know whether this was or is being delivered to this committee directly as well. But we mainly, the tone of the whole thing has been kind of regrouping after losing Henry, as you could imagine. And our main discussion topics were updating the bylaws, which we went through during the meeting, are going to do again in our January meeting. They haven't been updated in a decade. So there were some like minor changes to it. We decided to set the number of members of the committee at 13, where it had been like on a range 11 to 15. So we're trying to get in line with like being able to know how many vacancies are on the committee, which you can't do if it doesn't have a set number. One of the things that came up in that discussion was there are references in the bylaws to committee members like representing certain segments of the population, the community, the workforce, and there are no particular requirements, I don't think, for any members of the committee to be from or not from any particular population, but that was a topic that we were wondering, should we do that formally or informally? For example, I'm sure you know the members of WDIC include employees of Tompkins County, legislators, and then members of the public who don't have a official relationship with the county at all. And I don't know whether we've necessarily checked in on the diversity of the committee itself. For instance, one thing came up that I believe, I guess maybe Lisa can correct me if I'm wrong, that all the employee members of WDIC are in management as opposed to like union members. So that might be something to shift representation on. The other, I'll leave that there and happy to have discussion. And then the other thing we looked at was our 2022 goals and didn't get to setting 2023 goals, but I think we'll be doing that in January.
Thank you, Veronica. Does Ruby, Lisa, does anybody have anything to contribute to that before we open it to questions?
I wasn't at the committee meeting, so I can't speak to that. I do know that there is at least one one individual on WDIC who is not management and is part of, I believe, white collar. We, in the past, had representation from blue collar, but we no longer do. It's something to think about.
Thank you. I've got a quick question. Ruby, was that report on the workforce demographics in some kind of written form that?
It was in written form, but it was very preliminary.
Okay.
I will say that the last demographic report last year, we were able to pull the information from N4. We no longer have access to that system.
What the heck is N4?
N4 was the payroll system that was used prior to, and all of our reports were basically from that system. Okay. Getting the same type of reports from our new system has proven to be challenging. So, in fact, very challenging. So we're working on that. So the numbers I gave the WDIC were preliminary, and I wouldn't want to base my job on it.
Well, I wouldn't force you to do that. When we get a report that's more or less final, I think that that's something that all of the legislators
We're
would
hoping
like
to have that at the beginning of the year. We can give the final report like we in the same format that we did on last year, which includes the county demographics as well as the workforce demographics.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Any questions for Veronica or Ruby or Lisa about WDIC? Okay. Thank you, Veronica. You're welcome to stay till 5, but you don't have to. Okay, thanks. All right, and that brings us to our HR report. Ruby.
Thank you. I also want to say that the demographic report was also with the number of Board of Election employees that we have. The new system, because they have to be active in the payroll, we had about 300 extra positions between the Board of Elections positions and the JTPA. So they were not only just the full-time active employees. So we're going through all of that data, trying to make it more realistic.
So for anybody who's tuning in,
Yes.
that's the people that now that we have so many elections and so many early voting days, they used to be independent contractors and now they're technically employees.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
300 of them, great.
Well, and 957, I think, was the number that the system gave us as far as active employees. And we know that's not the number of full-time employees that we have.
I guess that's good. Rich, did you have a question for Ruby?
Yeah, I had a lagging question I thought of a while ago and just didn't have an answer. Could the county close its offices on Election Day and use its employees to staff all the election sites?
That would be a matter of negotiation, because it would have to be negotiated as a holiday or something, because not everybody would be working the election.
And it wouldn't address the early voting problem, which is the really big one.
Is that where most of the cost is coming from, or is it Election Day?
So many election days. It's the early voting, it's the normal election days. I honestly, we're having difficulty keeping track of when you're on, when you're off. So I really can't say at this point.
Well, I do know from experience, because I used to work the polls until I got elected, and now I can't, which is unfortunate, because if you've never done it, it's a great experience. But it was the addition of the early voting days that kicked everybody out of the range of pay that allowed you to be an independent contractor. And I know there are, like, for every election, and we've had multitudinous elections, it seems, the last couple of years, there's at least 5 or 6 early voting days.
We also had a number this year, special elections, right? Were there 2 special elections this year?
Yeah.
And I think that was a big piece of it, and also the wage increase.
Yeah, and then there was the wage increase, because it's like
Helps, but-
$600, I think that's the limit for independent contractors.
Thank you.
I would love for us to at least look at a utility infielder model. But seriously, for early voting too, that if offices could staff, and get credit somewhere, but try to do this internally so we didn't have the issue of trying to hire people that are there for, is it, how many hours? 12 hours? More? 15 hours? Yeah.
And you bring in the question of overtime versus holiday pay and.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We do the hard stuff, Ruby.
Oh, we're doing the hard stuff already.
There's no we about it. Ruby would do the hard stuff because this is another Rich John HBI, yes.
Somebody's got to take credit when it succeeds, We all have our burden to bear.
On behalf of the HRITS payroll team.
Did you want to move your resolution?
That we will never consider.
Yeah, it just seems like we're getting to an unsustainable thing and finding people to work and.
No, Rich is right. It is a resource to look toward. And I'll bet we'd be surprised if we took a look at the number of county employees that actually do take a personal day on election day. There are a fair number of our commissioners have been able to coerce into helping them out on election day.
But would it be possible, for example, to give our employees an option of spending a day manning the polls versus doing their job, their regular job? I mean,
there are some that do it now.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And it's not that many. Was it like 3 or 4, 2 that we were talking about during one of our meetings?
We need a more civic-minded workforce.
Well, and there's another place where the commissioners have been able to get some help in that a lot of the town and city clerks' offices and even the highway departments, because of the use of the facilities out there, that's where the polling places are. So a lot of the municipal workers are off on election day now outside of county government just because they can't go in because of the use of the facilities for polling places. So they draw a little bit in that direction too.
But we still have to pay them. We still have to pay them. So yeah, that doesn't,
Becomes a dire problem if we don't have the bodies to conduct that all-important process.
And I would suggest before we do anything like that, we have members of the HRITS team to talk about the behind-the-scenes requirements, changing pay codes in the middle of a work week, hours over the 40 hours or the 37 hours. There are certain things that happen behind the scenes that make just what we would think are simple changes difficult.
I don't think she likes this idea.
We're just trying to be helpful.
If it's an idea, I'm all for investigating, but I think we should have all the information before something is done. Because you also have to figure out not everyone will want to work that day. They'll get paid, and others will be working and paid. So you got to figure out the equality of it. So there are a lot of things that happen behind the scene that we have to consider.
Out of curiosity, does anybody know how much our election worker payroll total is for a year?
Well, I think this year, the last couple of years actually have been so bizarre because it was over what? Ouch.
Yeah, but it's also not like, it's not a huge number either. I mean, out of 200 million, right?
But that's just the payroll. That's what we dish out to those people. It doesn't factor in the amount of time that other employees are spending.
But what I'm saying is if we went to an infielder model, I bet I would maybe be willing to bet it would cost us probably more money in the long run. Just because you'd have all that time, you'd have all that comp time figured out. It's an interesting exercise to look at, but from a pure cost economics, we don't have, 15, 60 an hour. Many of the employees, their wage, we would be trading for a higher wage. We'd be losing, them out of the workforce for that day. there is a true cost to the county in that model, and I don't know if $100,000 is worth the, if it was $1 million, I don't know, maybe that's just my threshold, right? But whatever the number is, maybe it's not worth the exercise if there's not that much to had in the gain.
That's an interesting idea, and I'm sure Ruby and her HRITS people will fill us in on what it would look like to implement it. Mike?
In the old days, it was a couple hundred people, and they averaged $200 to $300 a year. And now, with the special elections and the multiple primaries and the increase, and then the addition of the poll site managers and the early voting, it's exponentially higher.
I know, they just... We need to start lobbying more heavily for a little state reimbursement to implement their early voting ideas. Mike, did you have your hand up?
I was just going to say, you got to be real careful about county employees. We could get tarred with expecting them to do something political.
Yeah, that's true too.
That to happen.
The other big change from when I was commissioner is it was a charge back to the towns for all the inspectors, and they would give us hell for creating too many election districts sometimes, because the charge back went to the town, and then the county ended up absorbing all of that cost somewhere in the last 10 years, maybe a little longer now. I think everything's underwritten now at the county level, and you don't go through that apportionment that we once did.
I think that was when the feds made us take over in the state at the county level, all of it.
I think Norma, did you have something to say about the chargeback?
You do, or is it just you do the chargeback, but I think it ends up on the county portion. It's just what you put to the towns individually, or am I wrong? Or do the towns actually cut a check to us?
I believe it's the calculation in their tax share and the sales tax. It does come into play on that spreadsheet.
So we recover some of that cost. Okay.
Minimal, but some of the costs.
Interesting. Who knew? Greg?
So we've had a lot of random discussion in this meeting, which I appreciate. But as we look maybe to next year, some of these sort of topical deep dives would be interesting to really, like what's the cost of an election? Or like we should be able to know that number as legislators, as county officials, right? Like some of these things should be top of mind, or we should be able to have that discussion. Or how did we fare in the pandemic with recovery?
Yep.
It would be interesting to maybe slot some of these type of discussions so they don't come up as ad hoc, but plan them out through the course of the year so that we do have 45 minutes to be, because I mean, if we didn't talk for the last half hour, we probably could have been done with committee business in 20 minutes.
Was there someplace you wanted to be, Greg?
No. I'm just, again, I like being here, and I like having these conversations, and I'm willing to invest the time. I just think it would be more fruitful to really hold space and time, enough time, not 20 minutes, not 10 minutes, but have an hour for a discussion on.
That's why we have committee goals.
Yeah, a deep dive of what's an election cost, or what are our rising challenges with, workforce numbers. Those type of committee goals for me, having now almost a year under my belt would be, I think that would be a good plan for a committee to look at some really meaty conversation around, and especially in this committee, what things truly do cost.
Well, I think that's excellent, and that's something I think we will have more discussion about next month. So are you done? Do you want to do your resolution?
I kind of have an update on the other things first,
Yes,
and then we
you
can do the resolution.
We're here for you.
Okay. Just a plug for the budget software. I'm excited about the possibility of a software that can integrate HR with budget and finance, particularly for the reason Norma mentioned as far as the vacancies are concerned. It's difficult to tell now to have a really good position control when we're creating positions, revising positions, because half the time we don't know what's the difference between an authorized position and a position that has been budgeted as well. So I'm looking forward to that implementation of that system. The compensation study is underway, officially began November the 7th when we provided the data that the contractor asked for. I'm looking to have a status update any day now. It was anticipated, because of all the other studies that had been done, that this could be done anywhere between 5 to 6 weeks. So we're right in that realm. And if you remember, this is phase 1 of the compensation study, which is a market analysis. It's really a comparison of our county salaries with some peer group salaries. So we should have that information hopefully by the end of the year. And you can review, and then you decide where we go from there. There will be some salaries that are lower than market rate. There will be some that are comparable. So it's really going to be a matter, I don't think we're going to find a block of all of blue collar are under the market rate. We're not going to find that. It's going to be positions here and there.
We're not going to be able to do a blanket, 5% or something like that yet.
No, I don't believe so.
More
and then you may have to figure out, again, this is the first phase. There may be a phased-in approach where some salaries are really below market rate that you want to address immediately. Some you may have a timeline. So it really depends on what we find. And the consultant will help us go through what we find and come up with some sort of phased-in approach or some sort of approach to address inequities. And Lee has that puzzled look on his face that I know he's asking. Are there any questions?
Kind of. So I appreciate the approach you're taking. It kind of indicates to me that this is going to push out a little bit further than maybe where we thought the beginning of the year we were. And my only concern comes back to maybe some positions and requests for review that had been made some time back, and it's, we've held off on making some decisions, and it just appears to me that we may be holding off that much longer. So I just from maybe a morale standpoint,
Mm-hmm. But I think, from the beginning, I cautioned everyone, this is not a one-step fix every problem. There are some positions that may not be a problem, which is the reason for the actual study. So we'll have to see. Like I said, I don't think there's any, even if we did an across-the-board increase, there's not going to be, it's not an easy fix. Some salaries may be way below market rate, and some salaries may not be. It's just your perception of what I'm paid versus someone else. So there will be, I would say, those who've made official requests that we address them one way or the other. But overall, it's not in one step, let's do this January and everybody's problems will be solved.
there's inequities out there, we ought to be addressing them sooner rather than later.
Right.
Thank you.
Mike?
Ruby, I wondered how the comparable peers are going to be selected. Are they selected by the consultant? Are we going to make
We gave them a list of quote-unquote peers. We included 3 counties. Saratoga was one, and I can't remember the other. Cayuga, I can't remember the other. We gave them City of Ithaca because it's in our neighborhood. We gave them Ithaca College because we lost some people to Ithaca College. And I think the public school system, Ithaca public school system was there. But the other one was county government, local government compared to local government. And then we added those other entities.
Okay, but are we also comparing some of the smaller counties, for example, around us? We seem to be drawing people from them.
Right. We were only looking at counties as far, they will give us a list of counties, but the ones we were really focusing on was counties with similar workforces, similar positions, things like that. Some of the local ones, the smaller ones, we already know for the most part our salaries are higher. So it won't include the real smaller ones because they're not really comparable as far as workforce makeup.
Okay, but for example, if you pull Saratoga, that's a fairly rich county in an area
really?
that's a larger urbanized area than certainly we're in. So I'm just kind of wondering about things like that.
Okay, so we gave Saratoga simply because of the population size, and it's similar. It's usually noted as one of our peer counties. So, but it was Saratoga, Cayuga, I can't remember.
Ben Seneca.
Seneca.
Well, Seneca's a small county. I'm sorry.
I butted in. I'm just kind of curious about Cortland County, though. In particular, sharing the college and then knowing the back and forth that we see
TC3
in
was mentioned as one of the groups as well.
public safety, and I know that the group that you're working with just did a compensation study there, and I'm forever intrigued when I go through Mike's district in the morning to see the inflow of vehicles coming from Virgil and Cortlandville. And so
They are aware that we have employees from the 6 contiguous counties, and there is a state, I remember there was a state report, the state did a compensation study too, so we could have all of that data as well. Even the counties and entities that we didn't include as a peer group.
Saratoga County comes up at 237,000 people. I was surprised at the way it was that big.
Okay, well, it'll balance out. I mean, if you balance out Saratoga, Cayuga, and Seneca, you're gonna, yeah. Okay, anything else?
That's all on the compensation study. Searches, we've completed the Clerk of the Legislature search. Starting in January, we'll have the Director of Finance, Chief Equity Diversity Officer, Director of the Workforce Development. Those are the larger ones. We have begun, and we're actually underway with performance evaluations for employees and department heads. So we're getting close to where we need to be for direct reports. I'm actually reviewing the tools they have submitted to make sure that the criteria that we approved in our policy is also incorporated in their performance measures. So that's underway. And the last thing is the year-end resolution. And what I would also like to add to that is but several of those positions are authorized. We're getting the authorization for, but they're not budgeted in the 2023 budget. So there may not be all of the 38 or 35 that we're looking to fill in 2023. Just a few. We're just getting the authorization to fill at some point.
In our 2023 budget.
Yes, you may.
Okay.
So if it's not included in the budget and we hire a person.
We won't be hiring without the budget for it.
Okay.
This gives us the job code, the title, gives us something to work with while the departments are figuring out at some point whether they will fill it. And we do have that process called position conversion. So there's a lot that goes on the background. But these are for any new positions that were created, any positions that increase their hours from 37 to 40 or decrease the hours. So there are, let's see, what do we have here? I was looking for specifically, we're working on the planning and sustainability titles. So they're authorizing them, and those also, there's shared funding with a grant. so it's not all county funding.
So it's not as bad as I thought.
No, and the two in human resources are simply changing of titles. They're not actually new position, they're just changing titles. Everything stays the same, just needed a different job code that had to be authorized. Yeah.
This resolution, though, this doesn't include if a position was titled and coded and listed properly, was vacant, and we approved it in our 2023 budget, that position wouldn't show up on here, correct?
That,
Like if there was a position that was just vacant in 2022 and we approved it in the 2023 budget, would it show up on this resolution?
No,
No, so there's.
typical vacancies, yeah.
Typical vacancies don't. So there's probably a slew of other positions that we didn't have in previous budgets that we've approved to in our 2023 budget that aren't on this list. My point being that this isn't the list we should go by for how many positions we added in the 2023 budget.
no, these are, all of the positions added in the 2023 budget are listed here.
But not necessarily
But not necessarily ones that were
we
vacant,
funded.
that we funded.
Right, but not necessarily positions you may have funded authorized last year that have not been budgeted. Am I correct, Lisa? Those won't appear here.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
These are simply, if we go by, these are positions that you have authorized, funded in the 2023 budget. There may be a couple other ones that have, like I said, the title changes, but no new budgets for.
Norma, did you have something that
Please say.
clarifies this?
I'm going to try. So, yeah, because I worked with personnel on this resolution, and I contacted each of the departments to make sure I understood how they were funding the positions. I think all, with the exception of one, and that's only because they didn't have a title for it, all the others have a budget associated with them. They were budgeted in the 2023 budget. So there is funding to cover all these positions, if that helps.
Okay, so they're on the books.
They're on the books.
All right. So it is as bad as I thought. Okay. So now that brings us to the resolution, ID number 11278, changes in position, various departments. Can I get a motion, please? Rich moves and Mike seconds. Thank you. Any more discussion on this? Can we confuse this further? Rich?
I just would second what Mike had said earlier, that in our upcoming year, I think we've got to be really, really careful that we're looking at it in a very different way in 2023.
Okay.
Recognizing that, I support the resolution.
I don't think we have much choice because we already voted this budget. So any more comments? All in favor? That's unanimous, however begrudgingly. Okay. Anything anybody else wants to bring up? All right. Oh, Drew has something for us.
It came up in some earlier discussion. I'll be sure to update the committee every month on it. I made a note to myself. But New York Class, which is our investment vehicle now, is now up to a balance. We've invested $25 million with them. And currently their rate as of today is 3.62% return.
That's pretty good.
And I'll update the committee every month on how much we have invested and what their current rates are. So it did take us several years to get to that point, but we did embark on them the second half of this year.
So maybe we should consider the money that we've invested with them as being, going towards our minimum, the 18%?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so what we've invested with them is fund balance that we don't think we'll touch in the near future, but they are very liquid. Within a 24, 48-hour notice, we can get that back. Because our balances do swing, I think when I did it with Jason when COVID kicked off, almost $40 million throughout the year.
Yeah,
We collect all the money and then we spend it.
and then we wait for refunds for 5 years. Okay, So next month, I think we will be talking about committee goals. We've sown a lot of seeds in today's meeting, so remember them, and we'll talk about them some more next month. Mike?
I'd also like to start talking again about the level of the fund balance policy.
Oh, well, yeah, we can add that. Just everybody come with your wish list. Okay. Anything else? Lee?
Do it, but some of my colleagues are probably going to want to revisit the conversation about sales tax and our relationships with the municipalities. That's come up 2 or 3 times.
I think, Lisa and Shauna and I have already talked about that. It's another thing on Lisa's
Oh, great,
list.
it's on the radar.
Yeah, it is on the radar for sure.
Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about, Lee.
Some of our members have, especially newer ones, have broached the question about how our sales tax agreements work, and it may be a good educational process. Drew gave us a little taste of it last week with the percentage that goes to the city, what's held by them, the amount that goes back to the individual municipalities, and how we got to that discussion. And I know it's a tough area to go to, but there is a desire to know more about that, because I know some members think that.
I understand. I just didn't know when you just said sales tax, you're talking sales tax agreement.
Sales tax agreement, yes, absolutely.
Well, and the allocation of particularly that 25% that goes to the city and how it gets allocated to various costs that we share.
Drew looks like he's just thrilled.
There's an exciting flow chart that I've heard from my colleagues that they're like, how do you manage that? So, yes.
Yes, it's in the front of my book. I look at it at least once a day.
And I think that would be great to go over, and I think Norma has some great history.
Byers didn't want us to talk about it. She'd just pull that flow chart out and say, here's what it looks like.
Well, flow charts can be changed. That's the whole point. Okay.
And thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for leading us over this past year, and it's been great to have the newer department heads and engaging with us here.
Well, it's been a treat, I must say. Rich, did you have something?
Lee stole my thunder. I thought we had a good budget year in terms of process. It seemed to go smoothly. Our meetings were timely. We did not have marathons. How we did that, I'm not entirely sure, but good job.
We are the crispy critters.
Well, GO puffs its chest out and says they're the best. I don't know.
We don't need to advertise. Anyway, okay.
The numbers speak for themselves. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Remember the '94 budget.